Mercedes took their fourth consecutive 1-2 finish in last weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas's victory means he's now back in the lead of the Drivers' World Championship, ahead of Lewis Hamilton by a single point. Meanwhile, Ferrari were again left scratching their heads as they were unable to topple the Silver Arrows on a track that should have suited them. Plus, according to the reporting I've been doing for the last week, even Red Bull were giving the Reds a run for their money. The fourth round of 2019 has left us with some very important talking points. Hello and welcome to F1 Happenings, presented by Green Flag F1. My name is Stephen Walton and 2019 is my fourth year covering Formula 1. In this podcast I'll be taking a harder look at a big story happening in Formula 1. I'll explain the facts behind the story before giving my honest thoughts and opinions on the significance of the issue. I hope you enjoy. So it's a week on from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and it was actually, although some people said it was a little bit of a boring race, it was quite an interesting race to see, given the result that it was yet another 1-2 finish for Mercedes, their fourth of the season, which makes it the most fourth consecutive of the season in the first four races. Which makes it the most successful start to a season we've ever seen in Formula 1, which is pretty shocking considering the dominance they had in 2014, 15, 16, and they didn't even manage it then. So, yeah, it's surprising to see them doing so well, and especially in Azerbaijan, because there was hope for a long time that Ferrari would actually steal this race. There was definitely discussions when Charles Leclerc moved up the field very quickly on his medium tyres that he was starting on. There was definitely, it looked like he was in the prime position, especially if there was a safety car. Then it was almost pretty much all said and done that it would be his race. But it didn't happen for Ferrari. It was a case of Mercedes, in my view, simply outraced them. It was showing that Mercedes are just a supreme race team, and they beat Ferrari on pure skill and pure pace. It was that Ferrari tried this. It wasn't the wrong strategy in my opinion. You know, Ferrari have made some howlers in the past, but this was a good strategy, and they had to keep Leclerc out for as long as they did. They kind of brought him in as early as they almost could have, and he did as much as he could, but Mercedes were just so quick in that time when they got their medium tyres on after the first stops around lap 14 and 15 sort of area. They then went till Charles Leclerc's stop on about lap 34. That's a 20 lap period almost, and they caught Leclerc, they passed him, and they just kept pushing to the point that by the time Leclerc made his pit stop, he was so far behind he didn't have the time, he couldn't make up the time. And that's what we saw straight away, is that when he came out of the pits, it was, he was going to be needing to catch up more than a second a lap, and that's a tough ask. And it wasn't that, as I said, it wasn't that the strategy was wrong. It was just that Mercedes were supreme. They were quick. They were quick when they needed to be. They made quick work of the Ferrari as well. I mean, sure, Leclerc was on far older tyres, but they breezed past him. And Mercedes just really pushed Ferrari into a place they didn't want to be. And the only thing in the end that that could have saved Ferrari would have been a safety car. And it didn't happen for them. So I think at the end of the day, it was probably a well-deserved 1-2 for Mercedes. They won it on that pure pace. They were the deserved winners. And yeah, it's a bit shocking because Ferrari you would have expected to be quite strong this weekend, but certainly I thought Vettel gave it away quite easily when he got up out of his car. And one of the quotes he said was that he, quote, couldn't get a feel and confidence in the car, end quote. And that just shows you that it was... They talked all weekend about tyre warm-up. We think in qualifying that the extra time for the two crashes that happened were hampered Ferrari as the tyres went out of the operating window, which we've always known with Pirelli has been very, very narrow. And it just appears that Mercedes perhaps were able to heat up their tyres better this weekend, and Ferrari just struggled to get it in the optimum range. And by the time, I know Leclerc certainly struggled on the soft tyres in the second stint, and even in the first stint. I mean, Ferrari looked better on the mediums, but it was the soft tyres, I guess, that won the race for Mercedes. So, Yeah, there's definitely an issue with tyre warm-up that seems to be track-related more than an underlying fundamental flaw. It looks like that was just related to Azerbaijan, and so I guess that means that this race, although it's yet another disappointment for Ferrari, it's not reflective of what will happen for the rest of the season. But yeah, moving on, another point that I took away, another thing that we I guess learned in Azerbaijan is that this is not going to be an easy season for Mercedes with deciding who their number one driver is. Valtteri Bottas has now retaken the lead of the Drivers' Championship by 1 point, so he's now got 87 points. Hamilton has 86 after 4 rounds, and they've won 2 races each. So it's a case now of who, when it's in that do or die situation, who gets the special treatment. We saw last year especially that Bottas was asked many times, Russia especially, to move over for Hamilton and to secure his Drivers' World Championship. But with the 2 drivers performing on an arguably an equal level so far, it means that at the moment it's harder for them to choose that one. I think if they said later on in the season, say things are still the same by the time we get to Spa, Monza sort of thing, and there's still only just mere points in it, if they then say, well, Hamilton's our pick for the Drivers' World Championship, it seems a bit unfair on Bottas if he's been able to match Hamilton at points, like he has been throughout this season, to then take it away from him. So the issue, I guess, for Mercedes now is that they might have a situation like we saw with Rosberg and Hamilton in 2016, and just that tension starts to build when you've got 2 drivers who are of equal ability, and they both want to be the leader of the team. And sure, Hamilton's a 5-time world champion and Bottas isn't, but at the same time, Bottas has probably, in my opinion, looked stronger this season than what Hamilton has. Hamilton's just hasn't seemed to have been himself. I mean, he does always come a bit stronger at the end of the season, then he wins the championship and generally doesn't do too well after that. But I mean, with exceptions last year. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season because it just makes it harder for them to implement team orders because they are just so evenly matched. And so that's one thing where, I guess, last season Ferrari would have trumped them, but even this season it looks Ferrari might have a similar issue with Leclerc, who's been, he was ahead of Vettel all weekend in Azerbaijan, and then he showed his inexperience, I guess, with that crash in Q2, but it was up until that point, everyone was expecting, especially me, was expecting Charles Leclerc to be on pole. I mean, we even led our coverage talking about how Charles Leclerc was in prime position because he had topped every practice session in the weekend, and he was a man in form, and then it obviously all came undone. So, especially for the 2 top teams, it looks like this year it's going to be difficult for them just to choose who their lead driver is. Right, so that's another thing I guess we've learnt from Azerbaijan. Can't just always talk about the front runners though. We might as well talk a little bit about the midfield. And it was quite an interesting race in Azerbaijan because the usual suspects from the midfield, Renault and Haas, were both very absent from point scoring. So Renault had a shocking weekend. My goodness, I think were they a double retirement? I want to say they might have been, actually. Let's have a look. I'm not sure, but obviously we know what happened to Ricciardo with that embarrassing crash into Daniel Kvyat. Let's have a look. I've just got the results here. No, Nico Hulkenberg was down in 14th. I can't remember off the top of my head what actually happened to him. Haas were 1 retirement. Grosjean was technically not classified. He didn't finish. And Kevin Magnussen was 13th, so no points for Renault, no points for Haas, but big points for McLaren, who finished 7th and 8th, and for Force India, who finished, or Racing Point, sorry, I should say, who finished 6th and 9th. So that's shaken up the constructors' standings a little bit. Now means McLaren is actually in 4th there with 18 points, and Racing Point is now in 5th, dropping Renault down to 7th, Alfa Romeo in 6th. So yeah, there's been some interesting movement in the midfield, and especially for McLaren. I mean, maybe a slow start to the season, but they are beginning to show now a bit more reliable, a bit more pace. So it could be interesting that we scrap in there because Alfa Romeo is another one who's they've been on form this season as well. So at the moment there's only 6 points separating 4th from 7th, so it's going to be an interesting fight, I think, during the season. That's another thing I think Azerbaijan's proved to us, is that there is no dominance in the midfield anymore, and it's very much all up for grabs. Anyone can win, maybe not Williams, but God, they've had some struggles. But yeah, certainly right down to Toro Rosso, I think, could be capable of taking that 4th spot. So that'll be one to watch as we get further into the season. Yeah, and I think that's kind of my main takeaways. I guess the one that we've reported on quite a bit, and we've saved, I guess, perhaps the best for last, we've reported a lot on this week, is how strong Red Bull were in Azerbaijan, and it almost went a little bit unnoticed. They struggled at the start, I guess you could say, and especially having Gasly starting from the pit lane made it a lot harder. But if you actually look at the numbers, if you ruled out the first 10 laps when Gasly and Leclerc were in traffic, once they got settled into a position, Gasly into 7th, Leclerc into about 3rd or something, oh goodness, I can't remember, I think it was 3rd, Gasly went quicker than Leclerc. And everyone's talked about the pace of Leclerc in Azerbaijan. So it surprised me when I read that press release from Red Bull that said, oh yeah, Gasly was actually quicker than Leclerc. I was kind of going, this doesn't make any sense. And it still doesn't really make sense to me. But if you then look at the timings, it shows that he was significantly quicker. And then right at the end of Charles Leclerc's stint, he gets really slow and Gasly gets really quick. So certainly an interesting one there, and one to watch whether Red Bull are perhaps making a little bit of a resurgence, maybe just a slow, sluggish start to the season, and maybe they are coming back. Who knows? It's certainly just interested me. That's the thing. I'm interested in it. I'm wanting to know why Red Bull were managing to at least even keep pace with Ferrari's unheard of, let alone be quicker. Like in Australia, they looked in a class, they looked a step down from Ferrari, did Red Bull. They haven't been on that same level all year. And then in Azerbaijan, with that mammoth back straight and a Honda engine, they're suddenly producing performances that are equal to Ferrari. And we even saw in qualifying, I know one of the commentators on Sky Sports, I can't remember which one, it might have been Di Resta, suggested that Verstappen was in line for pole position, which if he had actually run at the end of the session, he might have been, which is it's just shocking really to kind of think in my mind at this stage, after what happened in pre-season testing and the first few races, that Red Bull are now in a position where they look like they could be on the same level as Mercedes and Ferrari. So yeah, that's certainly going to be one to watch. And the other thing you've got to remember is in the driver's standings, now this is something I always remember, just little tidbits. Max Verstappen's actually 4th in the driver's standings, only 1 point behind Sebastian Vettel in 3rd. So he has had a good season so far. Unfortunately, he hasn't really been backed up by Pierre Gasly, who's had a bit of a slow start to the season. Could be doing a little bit better, but that's all right. But Verstappen's matching Vettel in the championship. And then the other thing is that once we'd heard this claim that Leclerc was quicker than Gasly at points, we went, oh, well, what about Verstappen? And if you look at his second stint, he closes the gap up to Vettel during that stint, and especially just before the virtual safety car, which he said heavily hampered him, he's catching up to Vettel. So that's the interesting takeaway from us. We're not sure what quite to make of it, whether it's a one-off, whether they just nailed the setup, nailed the tyres. We saw that Ferrari had tyre issues, so they were understandably a little slower than probably what they were hoping to be. So yeah, it's just one to watch, I think, with Spain next week. Ferrari was so ridiculously strong there in pre-season testing. What will happen, I guess, in Spain? Will Red Bull, will they have shown that they've taken a step forward, or was it just a one-off in Azerbaijan? That's what's puzzling me at the moment. So yeah, I think, as I said, I think I've summed it up well, hopefully, that there's a lot of takeaways from Azerbaijan. There's a lot of things that we've seen happen that are interesting, and bodes well for a very competitive season of Formula One. So we're very much looking forward to the Spanish Grand Prix next week from the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, a wonderful track where they do all the pre-season testing, so everyone knows it very well, which means it's always a little bit tighter. Yeah, so it should be a good race weekend, and we'll be looking forward to it. We'll be watching out for Mercedes, whether they can get a fifth 1-2. We'll be watching Red Bull to see if they can continue to match Ferrari. We'll be watching the midfield to see what shenanigans goes on in there, and yeah, ultimately it'll just be an interesting race. Thanks for listening to F1 Happenings, presented by Green Flag F1. For more relevant and up-to-date information on the 2019 Formula 1 season, head to greenflagf1.com for all of your Formula 1 needs. I'm Stephen Walton, and be sure to let me know if you agree or disagree with my Formula 1 thoughts and opinions. I'll see you next time.